Good morning and welcome to our news bulletin, coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Staria Strzemska. Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski is in Washington, where he met with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Friday. Rubio reportedly spoke about the need for NATO allies to increase defense investments, as well as the need for fair and reciprocal market access for the U.S. Speaking to the press after the meeting, the Polish Foreign Minister was reluctant to comment on whether he understood the U.S. negotiating tactics with Russia, but said that the American side appears to be committed to a lasting peace. Sikorski also declined to comment on what Rubio told him about the peace talks in Saudi Arabia, which took place earlier this week. The meeting in Riyadh did not include Ukrainian representatives, and the relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine has soured even more after Trump called Zelenskyy a dictator, who in turn said that Trump lives in a disinformation space. It is time to act, says Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, as Europe tries to play catch-up with U.S. President Donald Trump and his shortcut approach to peace in Ukraine. The Polish leader has proposed a concrete plan of action made up of 3 points. These include using frozen Russian assets to a larger extent, boosting protection of Europe's eastern flank, and finally reorganizing EU's finances to spend more on defense. Will these points resonate with the rest of Europe? Here's a report.
Meeting after meeting, summit after summit, the European Union is scrambling to find a unified approach to the US-led peace talks on Ukraine. But according to Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, the time for discussions has passed.
Enough talking, it's time to act. First, let's finance our aid for Ukraine from the Russian frozen assets. Second, let's strengthen air policing, the Baltic Sentry and the EU borders with Russia. Third, let's swiftly adopt new fiscal rules to finance the EU security and defense. Now.
Tusk's proposal is the first concrete plan to have been laid out by a European leader since US President Donald Trump recently spoke with Russia's Vladimir Putin over the phone and accelerated the peace negotiations. While all of Tusk's points had been previously voiced by Warsaw, the context of that appeal has changed drastically.
Talks between U.S. Donald Trump administration with Russian seems maybe allies, for what we can see, had been really as an earthquake for European leaders. And it seems that we have found out that for today, we are not really protected enough without U.S. support.
Back in October 2024, Warsaw's call to exclude defense spending from the EU limits on budget deficit was rejected by the European Commission. After recent developments, the Commission has changed its mind.
I can announce that I will propose to activate the escape clause for defense investments. This will allow member states to substantially increase their defense expenditure.
Given the uncertainty of the peace negotiations and Donald Trump's blunt attitude towards Ukraine, EU countries seem to be more eager to increase defense spending than ever. Even Germany, which has long resisted the idea of loans on defense, is now calling for less restrictive regulations.
Aus meiner Sicht kann Deutschland akzeptieren.
Germany can accept it if we allow the member states if they want to spend more than 2% on their defense. This will not be blocked by the criteria we have in the European Union for state loan financing.
Donald Tusk's second point on increased air, border and sea protection was well received by the European bloc when Poland first proposed it late last year. But it's the use of more than €200 billion of frozen Russian assets to aid Ukraine, which the EU has difficulty agreeing on.
And I'm not really sure if the other European powers are willing to join this proposition. Probably they will have to be discussed with the American side, because these are Americans who control Western financial markets.
Poland, the main transport hub for aid deliveries to Ukraine and the country which spends the most on defense percentage-wise in all of NATO, hopes to play an important role in the discussions on the end of the war. Can Donald Tusk's three-point plan be a step in that direction? The ball is in the court of European capitals. For TVP World, Kazimierz Łysiak.
Ukraine is working with the United States to prepare a draft agreement aimed at strengthening relations between the two countries. President Zelenskyy revealed during his Friday night address, stressing that a peace strategy must be created in cooperation between Europe and the United States.
Today, the teams of Ukraine and the United States are working on a draft agreement between our governments. This agreement has the potential to strengthen our relations, and, most importantly, the details must be arranged in a way that ensures it works. I hope for a result, a fair result. Today I had a very substantive discussion with the Prime Minister of Luxembourg about various ideas and proposals in Europe aimed at peace and security guarantees. The main conclusion is that Europe must and can do much more to achieve a real and lasting peace, and it is possible. We and our European partners have clear proposals, and based on them we can implement a European strategy. It is crucial that this happens together with the United States.
They don't have any cards, but they play it tough, said US President Donald Trump, referring to Ukraine's position in peace negotiations with Russia. Trump also said that his administration is making, quote, amazing progress towards ending the war.
It's been a very somewhat historic 4 weeks, and we have a couple of things in the works. We're negotiating with Russia, Ukraine, trying to get that horrible situation over with. It's terrible. It's just so terrible. I see pictures that you fortunately don't get to see. You don't want to see them. And that is a killing field. You have young soldiers being killed, thousands a week, and we got to get it over with. It's bad for Russia, and it's bad for Ukraine, and it's bad for us on a humanitarian basis. I've had very good talks with Putin, and I've had not such good talks with Ukraine. They don't have any cards, but they play it tough. But we're not going to let this continue. This war is terrible. It would have never happened if I were president, but it did happen, so I got stuck with it, and the whole world is stuck with it. We're making amazing progress. I mean, we've made more progress on that situation, which is Ukraine, than they have in 3 years. Again, it's so sad that it began.
Tomasz Wostowski of the EU Strategies Consultancy commented on the Polish Prime Minister's idea to use frozen Russian assets to fund aid for Ukraine in an exclusive interview with TVP World.
Well, obviously, what's changed is that the end of the war and the end of American support is on the horizon, right? So I think that's the key game changer right now, and Europe needs to start thinking how to finance the war, how to help Ukraine in the very short window that we have. Of course, we don't know how short the window is. We don't know how quickly President Trump wants to finish sort of U.S. involvement in this whole affair and in supporting Ukraine. But there's a clear sense in Europe and in Brussels in particular that the time is running out. So we need to really revisit all the options that we've discarded before and find any ways we can to support Ukraine. And of course, having these billions and billions of Russian assets is sort of a natural direction to go because A, there's a lot of money that we have. 2, it's Russian money, and who's to blame for all the damage and for all the destruction and for all the deaths in Ukraine? It's the Russians. So obviously, using Russian assets to do that would be sort of a natural way to go. There have been legal sort of problems raised with confiscating these assets and using it for Ukraine reconstruction, but I think sort of the patience with the lawyers in finding a way to use them is running thin.
Voters across Germany are set to cast their ballots to elect the country's new government on Sunday. According to the latest polls, the CDU is expected to take first place with 30% of the vote, followed by the controversial far-right AfD party with 20%. Olaf Scholz's SPD is trailing behind and is expected to get around 16% of the vote, with the Greens coming in fourth with 13%. The candidates had the chance to make their closing statements on Friday evening. At the final campaign event, CDU leader Friedrich Merz said that the first task of the new government should be to give Germany more weight in Europe. Merz has also once again ruled out the possibility of a coalition with the AfD. Olaf Scholz focused much of his final campaign speech on the US, criticizing Vice President J.D. Vance after his controversial speech at the Munich Security Conference, in which he decried Europe's restrictive laws, immigration crisis, declining safety and crackdown on free speech. German police has arrested a man suspected in a stabbing attack which took place on Friday evening near the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin and left a tourist seriously injured. The arrest was made 3 hours after the attack. According to the police, there isn't any indication of a motive for the attack. The victim, a 30-year-old tourist from Spain, is currently in a hospital and is expected to make a full recovery. The incident comes just 2 days ahead of crucial parliamentary elections in which violent incidents and terrorist attacks have been one of the main talking points. Slovakians took to the streets across the country on Friday to mark 7 years since the murder of a young investigative journalist, Jan Kuciak, and his fiancée. But these rallies are more than an act of remembrance for the killed couple. They're also a vote of no confidence for the current Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico. Our correspondent, Paweł Trzaskowski, is in Bratislava and has more.
The Friday's protests in Bratislava are already over. They lasted for a bit more than 1 hour, and when I asked the main organizer about the surprising duration of this demonstration, he told me that this is a part of Slovak protesting culture, that the demonstrations here are brief, orderly, safe, but persistent. And when I asked him about the reason for today's demonstration, this is the answer that he gave me.
We are against our Prime Minister because our Prime Minister decided to take Slovakia to Russia. It means that he's looking only for a relationship with Mr. Putin. And we are really, we as Slovaks feel that we have to protect our country and be part of the European Union and NATO and to be aligned with our partners in Europe. And Mr. Fico is working everything against it, so we don't like it.
All in all, protests on such a scale have not been seen in Slovakia since the Velvet Revolution of 1989. But everything changed 7 years ago when an investigative journalist, Jan Kuciak, and his partner were killed. And the protests that started there forced the Prime Minister Fico to resign from his post. The organizers of these demonstrations, the ones that started in January this year, are hoping to achieve the same result. From Bratislava, Slovakia, for TVP World, I'm Paweł Trzaskowski.
A SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launched on February 1st from California's Vandenberg Space Force Base made an unexpected re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, its pieces scattering over Polish soil. A local farmer is now considering legal action against SpaceX, while experts call for an FAA investigation into the mishap that left charred debris and stunned eyewitnesses in its wake.
Emergency services are working on the site where pieces of SpaceX Falcon 9 fell to the ground. A Polish farmer is considering legal action against SpaceX after debris crashed onto his farm. Pieces of the rocket fell in several areas. In the village of Komorniki near Poznań, western Poland, a gas tank fell on a local company's premises.
There were black pieces knocked down everywhere. Well, and one big black spot where the poles are. This was cleaned up by the hazardous material response team who came here. There, under the fence, this tank was found.
SpaceX rocket debris falling on Polish soil is something that should warrant an FAA investigation, said Dr. Piotr Witek from the Copernicus Science Center in Warsaw, talking to TVP World.
It is something that in different times should warrant an investigation by FAA. I don't know will it happen nowadays, now that Elon Musk is so important figure close to the government. Still, the matter of safety is important for the majority of players, and there are many mechanisms to help deorbit spent rocket bodies and other debris from the orbit. And this time it was there, but it simply didn't work as intended.
The Falcon 9's re-entry into the atmosphere over Poland was recorded by eyewitnesses. The rocket was launched on February 1st from the Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, carrying 22 Starlink satellites into orbit.
End of this week on Clara News Bulletin. World Talks coming up next. We're going to discuss the EU's sanctions on Russia.